Welcome to the Derek Loudermilk Show. This is episode 341 with Chris Michael Harris. Chris Michael Harris is our guest today, or CMH, as sometimes he is referred to on the internet. He is the host of the Startup U podcast, and he, along with his wife, they've created multiple seven-figure businesses. And today, he's going to share part of his story about his first business, which was a moving company that he created and grew, and it became this sort of multi-state business that was thriving. And then multiple things happened to lead to him losing his business. It's one of those real intense stories of failure because at the same time he was undergoing a health crisis. Basically, there was so much stress that he basically was burnt out and non-functional for a couple of years. So we're also going to talk about his health journey. What did he do? How did he become a biohacker, someone who understood his own health and brought himself back to full health over the last 4 or 5 years? Actually better, he's saying better health than he's ever had before. What is he doing? What are the tests that he's doing? The lab work that he's doing? What was his journey with that? Because I really like to look at how these high performers, especially when they deal with something like losing their health and their business at the same time, how do they bounce back? So you'll hear the full story of that. And then you'll hear he's come full circle. He started another thriving business, Podcast U. And we're going to hear some of the insights that he's learned from, training so many online entrepreneurs, where the future of online business is heading, and some of his key insights into the world of internet-based businesses. So without further ado, here is Chris Michael Harris. Chris Michael Harris, welcome to the podcast.
What's up, brother? How you doing, man? Aaron Rodgers.
Thank you. I'll take any celebrity I can get. Actually,
it's your doppelganger. I talked about it before we were recording, but for those that weren't watching or listening, obviously at that point, they're all of a sudden now in the comments are going to be like, "Oh my God, he looks just like it." You can't unsee it now. You can't unsee it, and I mean that as a compliment too. He's great.
I appreciate that. And my theory is that whenever anybody says you look like someone, most of the times they're comparing it to like someone well known, right? So those people are always pro athletes, celebrities, famous people. So it's always good to have you compared to someone, right?
But how weird would it be? And I'm glad you say that, because how weird would it be if somebody like came up to somebody, if I was like, "You look like my neighbor Tom," I'd be like, "Well, that's really creepy."
You look like Steve Buscemi.
Yeah, it's only a compliment if it's somebody famous. Yeah.
So, we'd love to just get a brief overview of what you're up to right now and how you got into that. But I think we're going to take this conversation in a bunch of different ways.
Sounds about right. So I can go and get started. Kind of grew up understanding that 9 to 5 wasn't exactly what resonated with me. I love people that it does resonate with, because they allow me to help see my visions become reality. If we were all the way I was, we would be absolutely insane. So built my first business from my college apartment. Found quickly within 36 months, we had a multi-million-dollar company. Had a major health crisis, ended up losing that business. And around that time, started recording the podcast, because I was like, I'm having these amazing conversations. It'd be great if I was paying it forward and like sharing what I'm learning. I can't tell you how many times I said, "Oh my God, I wish I'd known this 6 months ago." Right. And those were costly learning. It's growing pains, not growing pleasures. Right. So like, it was very painful to go through those things. So within 2 weeks of launching that show, we were trending top 5 under New and Noteworthy on iTunes, not now Apple Podcasts. And we use that to leverage some really big name guests, some mainstream folks like Damon John, Barbara Corcoran, Grant Cardone, Guy Kawasaki, Marie Forleo, if you're in the online space. I mean, it's a litany of just amazing people that I never thought I'd have the opportunity to meet as I read their book. And now I'm like, oh my God, I have their undivided attention, which was just baffling to me that that's actually reality. So then that kind of led to the online space. That was like my introduction to having an online business. I chose to go the natural route to recover from my health journey versus just take the next drug that gives you 10,000 miles long of side effects. So it was a rest and recovery period. Like things were not looking good. And so I had to kind of reinvent and, rebuild myself, so to speak. So the podcast is what I did. And then that led to me coaching and being involved with accelerator programs, teaching people about how to get early concepts and get traction. And then I launched recently, I'm now pivoting into, we launched what's called Startup U, like Startup University. Changed the name of the podcast to Startup U Podcast to kind of have some consistency. And we're teaching people with our flagship program. The first program we're launching is called Startup Launch Factory, where we're teaching people how to go from job into business seamlessly and effectively, because I see a lot of people executing that very painfully, right? Like making a lot of mistakes. I did this myself. When I say mistakes, always know it's through things that I learned, not because I'm being judgmental. So yeah, that's what I'm doing in a nutshell. That's who I am. That's what I'm doing.
Cool. Yeah. And, we have some similarities in our trajectory, like podcasting opens doors.
Right.
I was also amazed at the types of people I was able to have conversations with, like they had no business speaking with me, especially when I was starting. And actually, I'm kind of curious, to meet these people? What was your technique early on to connect with these sort of big names?
I'm gonna give you my secret sauce, huh? Honestly, LinkedIn. And that's a big hack that I've learned throughout the years is I connect with people on LinkedIn. And at the time, I've been doing it for years, probably over 10 years. And at the time, I didn't really know why. I think there's sometimes you see things you're like, this is going to be valuable. I don't really know how, right? It's not immediately obvious to me, but I feel like couldn't not be helpful, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing it anyways. So I spend always like 5 to 10 minutes a day. Even like I said, even a decade ago, just connecting with people, building that network and so on and so forth. And so when we were trending top 5 and I was like, okay, how do we leverage this, right? Like leverage is such a powerful word in entrepreneurship, in life in general, but specifically on entrepreneurship. How do I leverage what I have right now, this visibility, this exposure that I wouldn't have otherwise? Because everything I'd read said like, you got an 8-week window of trending, new and noteworthy. After that, you're not considered new and noteworthy anymore. So like, think of it like a theatrical run, right? Cinematic run for a movie. Like you got to capitalize. So I connected with, his name's evading me at the moment. And I always used to remember his name, Ted Kingsbury. Ted Kingsbury, I think is his name. Ted, okay. Definitely Ted. Anyways, he was involved with Shark Group, which is Daymond John's, like the parent company behind what he does, right? Like Shark Branding, Shark Group, whatever. So I was like, hey man, I'd been connected with him for years. And I was like, hey, I'm trending. This is what I'm doing. It's new, but I have this exposure, and I would show him screen grabs and stuff like that. I just emailed him from LinkedIn. I got his email from LinkedIn and emailed him. And he was like, yeah, man, this is great. Like, awesome. Damon would love to do it. I'm like, holy crap, really? So yeah, my secret hack, I think a lot of people drop into people's DMs and stuff like that. And the fact of the matter is like those people, they don't look at those things. So you really have to identify who the right person is. But I have found that the best way to do that is get a relevant email, primarily from LinkedIn. Been pretty successful for us. I know other people have their own methodologies of doing it, but that's been pretty effective for us. And then really nurturing relationships in between.
Yeah. So you had relationships already on LinkedIn with people, and then you just sort of called in the connection?
In that particular case, yeah. And then what I typically would try to do, I guess I probably should elaborate further on this. What I would typically try to do is be like, okay, who's my ultimate goal, right? Like, so if it's Tony Robbins, that's a bucket list item for me. Like, Tony's the man, and Tony, I'm putting this out there. If you hear this, Tony.
But I think he probably does listen to my show. So
of course he does.
Yeah.
But finding people that are connected to him that are more low hanging fruit. It's like the road to Tony, right? So I'd have like the road to these people that I want to have on my show at some point, right? And it's like, okay, who's a viable connection for me that's a little bit more realistic to start, right? Because he's so inaccessible. And then fortunately, then what you do is when you reach out, you're like, hey, I just had so-and-so, and I know you guys are mutual friends. And here's what he had to say about his episode with me. Here's the episode if you want to listen to what we talked about. And so that third party credibility of having that mutual connection is really, really powerful. So I've had 3 of the Shark Tanks. Daymond was the first. Daymond was the first we booked. Kevin Harrington actually came on before Daymond, and then Barbara. So Barbara was actually, people were like, how much did you pay for Barbara? Because Barbara charges like $20,000 apparently. I didn't know this, but somebody told me that she got a quote. She gave a quote to somebody to be $20,000 to do their podcast. Barbara came on my show for free, and they pitched me on her. She was launching her podcast. The reason is because I had Daymond. Through Daymond in the Shark Tank mix-up, I got Cousins Mate Lobster. They were pitched by me by their PR people to come on my show. They're one of the most biggest success stories from Shark Tank.
Okay.
And then Barbara is their investor. So I said to them like, hey, like I'd love to have Barbara. So they told Barbara, and then Barbara's team pitched me. and I didn't pay $1 for it, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
start to kind of like navigate strategically and figure out like who knows who, mutual connections, like what's viable, what's feasible, what's possible right now in this season, and like how do I keep manipulating and maneuvering that. So a little bit more complicated than what I initially said, but primarily speaking, if you want to get in touch with somebody, I go straight to LinkedIn and then do all the other things I said.
Yeah, and you're speaking to something of like, if you can find a club, an organization, like if one Shark Tank person is on, then they're all much more likely to
Right.
be, sort of say you're okay.
Right.
Like I at one point when I very first started, even before I had a podcast, I had this goal to write a book called How to Become a Pro Cyclist, and I was interviewing all the current national champion. This was like a decade ago, but as soon as I had my first national champion, in all the emails, I was like, just interviewed the mountain biking national
Done.
champion.
Yep.
And they're like, oh, well, sounds legit.
Yeah. You're so right. I'm glad you said, because your pitch is so important of like not only leveraging that, but some people, they've done really incredible things and they don't put that in their pitch. Like I don't get if Forbes wrote an article about you, like, dude, milk that, milk that until it's dry, right? Like use that. So I think sometimes people don't do that, what you're saying. And I think that's really an important point you're bringing up.
And so are you still using LinkedIn? Are you still actively?
Yeah.
And so what do you do? Like if you go and you find someone that you want to add and you just connect with them and then what do you do next?
Yeah. So I have a target board of people that I want to have on the show. And since I've connected, I mean, at this point, like Oprah is like a secondary connection because I've just like I spent so much time like navigating that. So I'll send a connection request, and then once they accept your connection request, you get access to their contact information. If they have a phone number listed, if they have a website list, like you get access to all that. So then we put it on our big board, and then we figure out, okay, what do we want to really talk to them about? So we'll try to find usually those people, most people, but usually those people specifically, those people being like more mainstream guests. They only really do guest spots with lesser known people if they're promoting something or just in general, right? They'll do their rounds when they're writing a new book or launching a new program, or like if Tony's doing Unleash the Power Within, like UPW, like, so you really have to be strategic about when. It's not just necessarily like, okay, I got their email. It's like, okay, but when are you gonna reach out to them? So that's something we do. And then we also see like relevant connections. So we'll craft our pitch. I have a video through BombBomb that we put together where it's like me presenting to big guests, like, hey, Tony, like, this is why I want you to come on my show. These are the guests that I've had, blah, blah. So he gets to see, because that's something that people don't do, is they just send like a text email. But what if Tony Robbins got something from me, like authentically telling him why I want him on my show? So that's a really powerful mechanism to use. But then also leveraging, like I said, what you want to talk about, what your show has done, who you've had on your show, and then your personalized touch, right? So that's pretty much the process as far as what we've done and how it's worked. And then occasionally you'll be on the horn with somebody and they're like, hey, I really, and then you have to deliver the product, right? You have to do a great job having them on your show and really promote it well and stuff. But then sometimes what they'll do is they'll say, hey, well, is there anything I could do for you? And you're like, man, I'd love for, I really would love this person I'm really interested in. Seems like a friend of yours or whatever. And sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, happy to send an email intro. Like that's happened a couple of times where they'll send an email intro to somebody else. And the next thing you know, I've picked up somebody else that's a pretty big name guest. So there's a lot of different ways you can get creative with it, but starting Genesis point, is first connect. Primarily speaking, it needs to be at least a secondary connection. If it's not, and they're like too far to reach, or you have to like add their email or whatever, you can kind of navigate that through like creating other connections first. Same way I said before, like what's the road to Tony? Well, the road to Tony might start like finding relevant connections before I just send a connection request to Tony, so that Tony sees, oh, we have like 7 mutual connections and I know these people, so he must be legitimate, right? So you have to be very, like, I love marketing, but I love marketing psychology better. Like you have to think like, what would Tony or Tony's team think seeing this request? Whether that's a connection request or whether that's an email request, like what would they think? Like what would they see? If they looked at my Twitter, what would they think? If they looked at my YouTube, like, and then putting yourself in the best light, or at least the best light you possibly can, right? So that you're presenting yourself to the best of your possible ability. So that's really all the things that we do, but really focusing on like, okay, what is our perception? How are they viewing us when they see this request?
Yeah. And what I notice about what you do is like, even for people watching the video, right? Your video looks a little bit better. You're probably using a better camera. You're looking into the camera. You've got a lot of these fine details. Sometimes you have multiple camera angles when people watch your shows. There's what I see you doing is like you have this polished sort of 100% professional level, whereas a lot of people are happy with 80 or
Yeah.
95%. So what is that sort of last little bit professionalism that you're bringing here?
Being OCD. No, I think so prestige is, you have to kind of look at like your values, right? Prestige is a big one for me. So I like nice things. My mom always told me from even a young age, she was like, you better have a good job because you like expensive things. So it's just kind of a character quality of mine first and foremost. So if I see things that I don't like, I'm like, oh, but it looks pixelated, or I don't like this, or I don't like that. Like that's kind of just an intrinsic thing about me. But here's the thing too, though. It's like you're putting something out into the world that like everybody's going to see, and those things do make a difference. So for me, it's really, and I say this often, people are like, they think that I just got lucky with New and Noteworthy on iTunes, or they think I got lucky with my first build in my college apartment. It's really going the extra mile and doing the things that other people probably aren't going to do, because that's your biggest area of opportunity. Like I knew in that first business, in the moving business, like I knew the things that people weren't willing to do. I knew the things in that industry. People were like, oh, that's a blue collar industry. I would never want to run a moving company. Well, guess what? There's huge opportunity because it's a very dinosaur industry with a lot of blue collar folks that aren't thinking innovatively. They're not like moving the needle forward. So if you can come in and cause some disruption and rock the boat a little bit and present a better offer and a better solution, you're going to explode, which is precisely what happened. So same thing with the podcast, right? Like I did a ton of research. Like I really put forward a lot of effort to be like, how do you get New and Noteworthy? And one of the biggest things was have a great looking thumbnail, have amazing sounding audio, right? Put out at least five episodes before you launch your show. So it's not just like one episode, here I am, right? So it's just going the extra mile. I don't want to be cliche and say like do 110%, but it's really being diligent. I think sometimes we're too eager, Derek. Sometimes, I want to qualify this. Sometimes we jump into things when we really need to kind of sharpen the axe first a little bit. And then on the flip side of that, we need to just get off our ass and jump in, right? So you have to really have self-awareness to know which side of that spectrum you're on. Yeah. For me, it's slow down a little bit and like do the extra work, which is what I'm doing right now, creating this webinar and like being really thorough, because I know it's going to be a 7-figure funnel. Like I know that. So I have to really be diligent about it. But first and foremost, I think too, it's looking at the market objectively and being like, if somebody saw this in relation to somebody else's YouTube channel, like why would they want to subscribe to listen to me over the next person that's talking? Like there's a new person right now that's creating a YouTube channel that is exactly the same as mine right now, maybe hundreds of them just like mine with similar content. What can I do, right? So that I stand out? What can I do so that they subscribe to my show and continue to tune in, whether it's my podcast or YouTube, or they buy my programs or whatever, over the next guy? And you just don't want to leave things up to chance that you can control, right? Like I'm ADD, so I'm all over the place. I can control that to a degree, but largely my message is always going to be a little bit convoluted because that's just who I am. But I can control my stupid camera. Like I can control the lighting in front of my face. I can control the microphone that I use. So to me, it's just looking at it objectively. And I think Mark Cuban, a lot of entrepreneurs talk about this, where they're like, work like someone else, like your competitor is working right now, right? And that can drive you crazy. Don't get me wrong. It does drive me crazy. But there's little things you can do that just cover your bases. They're like, why wouldn't you do that, right? So I think looking at the market objectively and having brutal honesty with yourself about where you are and the presentation you're putting forward, both with yourself and your equipment, your tech stack, your solution, your website, your podcast, whatever, right? And having pride in that.
Yeah, there's since I read it a couple months ago, Pressfield's book Going Pro, and he's talking about the difference between an amateur who's sort of avoiding their life's work and a pro who's like committed to their life's work,
right?
And just playing with that identity of is how I'm showing up. Is this an amateur way, or is this the way a pro would do?
Totally.
If it's the podcast or parenting or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a disruptive idea in the moving space? Is that how you got into that?
Yeah. Well, so yes and no. The biggest, well, the answer is yes, but it became way more disruptive and this is totally a thing, by the way, that if people are looking to start a business, like sometimes you just have to get in, right, and go for it. Because I think some people were like, but it's not like really disruptive yet. I have learned that the further you immerse yourself into a market, into a business, the more disruptive ideas you have. Like you're not going to like sit and marinate on an idea until you like really get into it. And then action leads to the unraveling of these crazy breakthrough visionary ideas, right? So to start, it was primarily workforce, right? The workforce in the moving business was middle-aged men, a little bit unrefined, kind of blue collar, like I said. So we employed college students, and we were doing more so people that didn't need a full service moving company per se. Like they didn't need a national carrier, right? They didn't need somebody who's going to take them across the country from New York to Los Angeles or whatever. So it was just those little tiny moves from, you know, a 4-bedroom house, which is not a tiny move by any stretch, but a 26-foot truck could accommodate that, making multiple trips across town, right? Like that's a huge market. Most people move within 10 miles of where they currently live. That's a huge market. But using workforce that was future attorneys, future CPAs, future whatever, right? Like really smart young men that are looking to pay their way through college. So that's where we started. And what we found is like that sophisticated approach just intrinsically through who they were, right? Not necessarily anything that we did, but just the right people in that position. People just enjoyed that a lot more. They enjoyed the fact that they actually cared more about moving their things, moving more with their mind versus their arms, right? Like really thinking about, okay, like this makes sense. I'm not going to put a box on top of a lamp because that really doesn't make a lot of sense. If you could actually do that, I know you can't. But anyways, but then it really advanced a little bit further. Then we started to get really, really, you know, using technology, automations. We actually had, we were completely digitized. Like we had removed paper forms altogether. You could fill things out like just on our guys on their smartphones. We were rolling out cameras that were actually stealth cameras on their hats, their company hats. So we could see anywhere in the field what was going on in real time. So if damage happened, they couldn't say, the guys couldn't say they didn't do it because we've got it captured what they're looking at. Right. So it became more advanced as we went along. But again, I want to reiterate that most people enter into a space thinking like it's not disruptive enough, so I can't start yet. Like it will continue to evolve and adapt as you go along. But we really, really use technology. A huge opportunity, by the way, is a lot of offline business owners, they're like, well, it doesn't apply to me. I'm not in tech. Yeah, but you can leverage tech, right? There was a million different applications that we applied in the same capacity to really augment a very unrefined and very antiquated industry.
Yeah, that's there's a parallel. I just had the experience of we were trying to decide whether to sell our house. We had an Airbnb or to hire a management company and give up because we had been managing it. It was just taking up time and we didn't want to do it anymore. And so I started talking to this guy and he was like, well, we could probably increase your profitability by 50%. And our fee is 25%. So not only are you going to save your time, but we're also going to bring in more money. I was like, wait, I've already got everything optimized. How, what are you doing differently? And but he had this laundry list of these little things of like the digital check-in to the like having all the sheets being the exact same to, all these marginal improvements or tech improvements.
Right.
So it was really cool to see, how he had this whole system worked out that could lead to such a big increase in profitability.
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you bring that up because it reminded me of something. One of the biggest things that so it evolved from a residential moving company into commercial installation. So we had a commercial and a residential division. On the commercial side of things, we did turnkey furniture. So basically think like glorified IKEA, but the trend in student housing for off-campus student housing apartments was fully furnished units. So you show up and you don't have to bring grandma's old oak furniture. So it was funny because we were feeding on both sides of the spectrum. When you brought grandma's oak furniture, guess who you called for us to move because it was crazy heavy? Us. Now, on the flip side, the building wanted to provide the furniture. Guess who you called? Us, right? So we were feasting on both ends. But the beautiful thing is that what we quickly realized, to your point about innovating, those industries and like just focus on like, okay, how do you make marginal improvements? What we found was that for furniture manufacturers to bid on a property, right, to furnish their building, they needed the price of installation, not just the price of furniture, right? Because they were the direct client of the building owner. And so thus they needed someone like me to provide pricing. What we found was that our competitors took like 2 to 3 days to get them pricing, meaning that's a huge opportunity for someone else to swoop in and give them a good price and close that bid, right? So we were like, how do we do this? We created this ridiculously elaborate, we called it the Iron Man, most ridiculously elaborate Excel sheet you've literally ever seen in your life. It measured down to 9 decimal points of accuracy, where we could turn accurate pricing in 15 minutes. We went out to literally like qualify this thing. We went out to measure how long it would take individuals to carry certain items of furniture so we could go put that into our equation. And like all of these ridiculous things, like how long did it take to unwrap furniture, how long did it take to install, and all these different measurable data points that we would put in to where we could put out accurate pricing within 15 minutes. And we got to the point where just by doing that, if it was a last minute project, if like something came up and they're like, oh my God, we need new furniture and we need it by, 2 weeks, they wouldn't even go to anybody else. We were the only nationwide player that would get that call. And you talk about being able to charge a premium. You're the only person that can even turn pricing that quickly. So yeah, we became very popular for that reason alone. We became very, very popular in that space. And that led to millions of dollars in revenue.
Wow, that's super cool. And I'm almost imagining like the logical extension of that is like you call up someone before they even know they need you. You're like, hey, I know in 2 weeks, you're going to ask for a bid.
Right.
Here's the price. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, oh my God, how did you know?
Yeah. We thought about turning it into software and then charging them to use it. Never got to that iteration, but that was a long-term thought. To your point, that was a long-term thought. But like, why do you need us to come up with a price? Like come up with a price and then just pay us to use this software. But then theoretically they could use it and then go hire one of our competitors. But at that point, it's like, we don't necessarily need that. If we're charging the right amount of money for you to literally every single bid you do, you need our software. That would have been powerful.
Yeah. It's Microsoft territory.
Yep.
So you said you lost the company.
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly?
Oh God, how much time do we have for this one? So yeah, when coming into 2016, I started to notice that I was really dragging. So I was approaching I was 29. I was approaching my 30th birthday. And I started to really feel like my energy just wasn't what it was before. And so we had known for a few years that there was something going on. Like I just had a lot of issues health-wise. And even going back to middle school, like, was put on antidepressants and ADD medications and things of that nature. But it started to get to the point where it was affecting like my normal human functions, right? Like not being able to go to the bathroom normally, right? Those kind of things, energy depletion, things of that nature, a lot of irritability, mood swings, stuff like that. So we were in Puerto Rico in January of 2016. I was diagnosed. I'll get to that. I was like later on. So that was like May or June, like right before, after my birthday, around there. So all of a sudden we got a notice from the Georgia Department of Public Safety where they had decided, and this happens. My father was in the used car sales business for a while, where like the government will come in and decide like, we're going to clean up this industry. It has a bad reputation, whatever. And like, we're going to really make our standards a lot more strict. So anyway, so they decided that they were no longer going to allow moving companies to use rental trucks. Well, part of the reason we were able to grow as seamlessly and as quickly as we did is because we didn't have that traditional overhead. Probably some crony capitalism going on. If I'm being totally candid, probably some of the big players like 2 Minute Truck got involved. Not them specifically. I'm not trying to get sued right now. Jesus. But probably someone like them came in and was like, look, here's the deal. These guys are doing this and like, make this go away. Right. So companies like us were getting the cease and desist visits from the sheriff. So we got one of those saying we can no longer use rental trucks. The process to go through to then be able to get your own trucks was quite ridiculous, because when you're a new company, think like you're 16, your insurance is really expensive because you just started driving. It's the same thing for business. So when you have a work comp policy, workers' compensation, you are in what's called an involuntary market, meaning like you're in the at-risk category, right? Because you're a new driver, like if you were driving, right? So in order to get somebody to do the underwriting for a truck policy, they require you to be in a standard market policy or standard market for your work comp, right? So truck policy requires standard market. So you have to get into a standard market. Most of those standard market underwriters, if you're a new company, since it's high risk, they require all the money up front, and it's absurdly high. So mine was $125,000 up front just to get into a standard market, $30,000 to underwrite the policy for the truck, plus the acquisition of the truck, which is $30,000 to $50,000. I'm looking at a $200,000 investment to have one single truck and be in legal compliance with the Georgia Department of Public Safety. That's absurdly ridiculous. For a startup, now we had already eclipsed 7 figures and beyond at this point, but that kind of liquidity is not what you see with a business that is having a meteoric rise, because growth requires cash, right? It's very, very difficult. So I go crazy on the hunt. got a couple bridge loans from some, they call them friends, families, and fools, right? High net worth individuals. Meanwhile, I'm still trending down health wise, right? Like I'm still like kind of burying that in the closet somewhere, like kind of pretending it doesn't exist. By May, with all the stress and complications and things that are going on now, because things were quite crazy, I'm having to outsource jobs because I just got a cease and desist. I'll go to jail if I continue to operate. That's obviously not something I'm interested in doing. So I'm having to outsource, meaning I'm making like very little money in the middle, in addition to the overhead I already have and the salaries that I have, right? Plus now having to acquire all these assets and these policies that I need. Borrowed money. I mean, it was crazy, dude. I was just leveraged out of my mind. So then I get the health diagnosis in May, June. Doctor's like, dude, you're going to die by 40 if you keep, like, literally, you're that bad. Like your situation has become that bad. It's causing a chain reaction with what's happening with you. We can get into that later. So I pitched 725 investors from my diagnosis till the day we closed the doors of the company. So that was May, June. It was end of August we closed the company. 725 investors.
Jeez.
Got multiple commitment letters, was ready to close a deal for $1.5 million for 25% equity in the company. 4 days before I'm supposed to sit down with my lead investor that's putting the whole deal together, right? Usually that's what happens. You get a lead investor, and then the lead investor will pull together his buddies and be like, I got this deal. We should all do it. Like, I'll contribute the highest portion. I'll do 400,000 if you guys do 200 apiece, whatever. So 4 days before that, I get a call from my COO, and he's like, look, are you sitting down? I'm like, shit, what happened? My guys were on a move, and you're going to wonder, like, wait, I think I got a cease and desist. I'm getting to that. They're using the jaws of life to get the other people out of their vehicle that ran into our moving truck. And they're going to life flight them to the hospital. It doesn't look good. I'm freaking out, dude. I'm freaking the hell out. Because in July, I decided, as these things tend to happen with bureaucratic processes, they told us in January it would take a month for us to get cleared and have the things we needed to operate the truck and be in legal compliance again. State of Georgia, right? Well, this is end of July, prime moving season. This is this is where you make your money. 85% of your revenue comes in the summer with the moving business. So we're hurting. I've gone most of the summer without, taking advantage of that. Money is gone. We've depleted everything. So I made the decision, calculated risk. I have no choice. I have to continue to operate. My work comp had lapsed. My general liability had lapsed. Now I'm operating, ignoring a cease and desist order, right? Now my guys just got in a car accident. I'm going to jail, like for real. Like I'm going to jail. If these people die, God forbid, if my guys or these people die, dude, I'm sitting in jail right now. Probably to this day, I'm probably in jail for real. That's not exaggeration. I'm probably in that kind of trouble. So I'm having a literal panic attack. I'm on my way to Florida. I'm like, my wife and I are going down there, and I'm literally like crying the whole way. I'm like freaking out. Like our lives are never going to be the same. Thank God, literally thank God, whatever you believe in. Like for me, it's just, this was the realest moment ever that this existed, because they were unscathed. My guys were, and I had just so happened that we purchased the biggest insurance policy that Budget offers, Budget rental truck, because that's where we're using a rental truck. And they paid out the entire $1 million to the other people that ran into our vehicle. $1 million settlement. It happened in Florida. If it had happened in Georgia, it would have raised the alarms. Like it would have been like, this guy doesn't have, and I had already gotten USDOT approval, not Georgia Department of Public Safety approval. So I was cleared to do interstate, not intrastate jobs. If that had been the opposite, if it happened in Georgia, again, I'm in big trouble, and I'm in big criminal legal trouble now from violating that cease and desist, big time. So my attorney called at that point. He's like, dude, I know you've been doing this, because I had cleared it with him. I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. He's like, I obviously don't advise you do it, operate with a cease and desist, but you got to do what you got to do. So anyways, he's like, henceforth, the business is closed, and we're now in defense mechanism mode. Like we are protecting ourselves. We're getting ready for litigation, both with the accident, but now also I'd raised money again from the high net worth individuals. I'm not gonna be able to pay that back. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. So they're coming after me for sure. It's just a matter of when. The minute they find out that my business is closed, they're coming after me. So I got multiple lawsuits now. At this point, my health is just completely depleted. I was making like maybe 1 movement a month, 1 to 2 movements a month, right? Bowel movements for those that need further clarification. So I'm a disaster. I'm a train wreck. Health is depleted so bad, I'm literally having suicidal thoughts. Huh?
Is poop just piling up in your?
Oh yeah, no. The color of my skin was like more of like a greenish, because I'm building up toxins in my body. I had to take heavy cleansers to be able to just flush my system, and I do that once a week just to be able to just not be backed up with toxins for sure.
Wow, that's how Elvis died, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, just when you're that bad, when you start shutting down internally, you got big problems. You got to deal with it soon, or you're gonna have big problems. So we're like fighting to not get evicted because now we have no income. My wife, in the meantime, I had told her, like, look, she had clients, she had a healthy business, as a social media manager. I said, we got $1.5 million coming in. Go ahead and transition to selling courses online. We're good. So she fired all of our clients. We didn't get the money. And now we're like, holy crap, we're going to get evicted. She can't go back to the clients and be like, hey, I'm actually back. Right. So it's like, she was literally launching her flagship program, which is now a multi-million-dollar company. Thank God. She was launching that in the middle of us driving to Florida to deal with that car accident. She's sitting there in a laptop, like just frantically, like trying to like launch. And we got our first 75, 80 members paying monthly fee. And that like totally saved our ass. Totally saved our ass.
Wow.
So yeah, so 2017, that was like August, September 2016. For the next like year and a half, man, I pretty much spent my life in bed. I identity crisis, depression, health is a disaster. Everything that I built myself up to be was gone. I feel like a fraud. I had these lawsuits, felt guilty that I like took these people's money and I didn't know I was going to be able to pay it back. They were accusing me. They like were trying to extort my parents, sending letters saying like, we're going to go to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And, because he did RICO and all this crazy accusation. I mean, you would have thought it was Al Capone if you looked at the actual complaints. It was the legal complaints. It was ridiculous. But when you've never been through that, it's terrifying, right? Like every time the door knocked for like a delivery or whatever, I was like, this is it. The sheriff's here to serve me. I'm getting sued. Literally for like a year. That's how I felt. So yeah, man. So that is the full story. And then around that time is when I started the podcast, but I felt horrible. And sometimes those episodes that I did, it was like the only thing I did that whole week. Like, and I felt so bad physically, health wise, that like people that are listening, not watching, but I was like this, just like leaning on my hand because I couldn't even sit upright. That's a true story. I couldn't even sit upright. I felt so bad. At this point, it had just caused a chain reaction where I was deficient in every possible category. My testosterone, all my essential vitamins and minerals and nutrients were just completely depleted because when you're not absorbing things in your gut the way you should, everything's, you are what you eat. If you're not absorbing anything, your body just starts to just shut down. My thyroid, I was 00 on my iodine, urinalysis and saliva analysis. My thyroid just wasn't working, which means you're not regulating your hormones the way you should. Plus, if you're that inflamed, your adrenals are overworking because they're producing cortisol, because cortisol is a natural anti-inflammatory. So they're just working nonstop. So you have no energy. Your hormones are out of whack. You're not going to the bathroom. I mean, it gets real ugly real fast. So yeah, from that point forward, man, it was rebuild and regroup and figure out what to do going forward. And fortunately, I can say, I know we're not there yet, but fortunately, I can say like now I'm the healthiest I've ever been, not just recently, but ever in my life. Through what I learned through that experience. So it's been a blessing in disguise.
Wow.
A lot to unpack, I know.
Yeah. And I'm just feeling all kinds of different things as you are describing that, just like when talking about your health, I'm feeling like sick to my own stomach. And then just imagining someone trying to sue me makes me start to sweat. And I guess what I'm wondering about is, when you sort of you lost your business, you were losing your health, you're like your back's up against the wall. What was your story about yourself? Like, how did you view yourself and your identity at that moment?
Yeah, I think it's tough, man. I think specifically in this country, and I know there's people, you have a global audience, so and maybe it's the case there, but definitely in the States, if you're not from the States, kind of peel back some layers here, but very type A driven people in the States, in the Western society. It's, hi, I'm Chris. This is what I do. Hi, I'm Derek. This is what I do. It's not any further than that. It's almost synonymous with your name is what you do. It's part of who you are. At this point, I'd been invited. It was in Athens, Georgia, where I built this business, where I went to college at UGA. So I had become kind of a big name in that town because of what I did. It was like, everybody. So it was really tough, man. I definitely feel like a fraud. Whether it was like, I definitely knew there were circumstances were out of my control with that, but you obviously feel like I'm a good person. So I obviously feel bad about not being able to pay these people back. Right. Like I know it affects their family and this and that. So where I was very worthless, very helpless. I've never felt like a victim in my life, but I certainly feel like a victim. A lot of self-pity, a lot of doubt that I would ever be able to do what I did again. And then now, so I mentioned I was on the antidepressants and the ADD medication and stuff like that. Like I got completely off of those. And what you don't realize is like those put a Band-Aid on things. And then when you take that off, in addition to this like real crisis that's happening, it's like a double whammy, right? So it's like, I realized how much I had used the drug as a crutch, and now I don't even have that crutch. So I just felt, and then also too, I've never had to like fully trust somebody, you know, and like I had to trust God completely. And I'd never had to do that before. I'd always been able to get by, and I don't say this to be boastful. I'm sure there's many people that can resonate with this. I'd never had to trust something beyond myself to the degree that I did now, right? Like I'm truly wounded. I truly cannot do the things that I did before. I can barely, I mean, taking the trash out was like a wow, big day. Like going to the Kroger, right? There's a grocery store for those who don't know, was like big old day for Chris today. Went to Kroger and bought some groceries. Like that was for real, man. Yeah. And so helpless, hopeless, defeated. I mean, it was a real dark place, man. It was a real. Everybody was like, 2020 was tough. And I'm like, brother, it was, right? But 2020 compared to my 2016, 2017, walk in the park, right? Strengthened me in a lot of ways. It made me realize what's important to me in a lot of ways. It made me realize that sometimes, as controlling as I am, I have to let go and trust the infinite wisdom of the universe and of God in a lot of ways. And it also showed too how much I actually give a shit about what I do, right? Like it's one thing to say I'm an entrepreneur. It's something else to go through hell and be like, I still want to be an entrepreneur, right? Like most people, if they got bit by a shark surfing, they'd be like, I'm never surfing again. I'm never going to come to the beach. The people that get back out there and they're still boarding with one arm gone, those are the people that just know, like, this is what I was born to do, right? So it was kind of it ended up becoming one of the biggest blessings. One of my friends told me this. He was like, your mess became your message. And that has really stuck with me because I've been able to help people in ways, Derek, that like, first of all, I never would have thought possible. I thought that sharing this story, which I didn't share for a long time, by the way, about what happened, because I couldn't, because I was being sued. I'm not about to go give a public deposition, but also because I was so embarrassed. Right. So I tell people like, oh yeah, I exited. And I didn't say like what that meant. Right. I just left it up to interpretation, which they probably thought I sold the company, but that obviously wasn't the case. But yeah, man, I've been able to help people in so many ways, and people ironically had so much more respect the fact that I failed and got back up and like have been building in spite of that. They're like, that somehow is more meaningful to them than the fact that I built something to begin with, which was exactly the opposite of what I expected. But then really, and this is a big thing for me. We are so unhealthy. We being society today, our modern lifestyles and the way we've bastardized this world. I always say this, I eat like a hippie now, but man, we just get it so wrong. We get it so wrong, and we're so unhealthy and we don't even know it. We've just accepted suboptimal health. And we've just been like, oh, well, this is like, we don't even think about it. Unless you have like dire situation, you're in the hospital. We don't think like, oh, I'm not healthy. Right. Like I don't have a sore throat, so I'm healthy. It's like, dude, we're so suboptimal. And it's become painfully obvious to me. And so sharing that with people and being able to really have like, I have conversations all the time, Derek, where people will be, in a bad situation. They hear my health journey and they're like, oh my God, like I have this going on. What do I do? And being able to push them in the right direction or give them any kind of insight or wisdom as far as what I've learned. That would not happen, right? Like we can't assume that we always know how God is using us. And now, instead of looking at like, oh, woe is me, I went through this thing. It's like, no, God trusted me with this. I did it to myself, but God trusted me with battling my ass off and learning what I need to learn to get out of it so that I can empower other people, so that I can talk to other people about what true health and wellness looks like, so that I can inspire them to pick themselves back up and be like, go, you did it once, dude, you did it once and you had no idea what you were doing, right? Imagine now, right? Like we have this fundamental flaw where we look at things and say like, oh, I'm starting over. That's like, this isn't a video game. Like you don't hit reset and like lose all your stats. Like you keep all your stats, you keep all the knowledge and wisdom you have. So you're never going back to square one. You're building on where you are right now. you just have this false perception of what that means, right? Because we measure things in a really messed up way. Like, yeah, I don't have that business anymore, but imagine what I can do with the experience that business gave me, because that's invaluable. That's more than any dollar we ever made in that business. Learning what I learned about health is going to extend my life, for one, by decades, literally. But then on top of that, it's going to allow me to not just live now, but have more energy later, have more energy, to do more things, to serve at a higher level, to have more bandwidth, to love to a fuller capacity, to be present to a fuller capacity, to experience life to a fuller capacity. That's a gift, right? And had I not experienced that, I would have just kept taking the pills and just keep building this moving company and like not experience the fact that I was really walking around as a zombie, a pharmaceutical zombie that wasn't fully experiencing life to the fullest degree that was possible. And now I'm almost mid-30, almost my mid-30s. I'll be 35 in a couple of weeks. Scary, but it is reality. I feel better than I felt at 17, 18 years old. And I literally go do things I did when I was 17, 18, and I have more energy and vitality. I went to play basketball with the young kids the other day, and I'm like, dude, I'm running around in circles around them, right? And I wouldn't have been able to do that. I was always like short-winded and then have really good stamina because I was sick and didn't know it for so long, right? And now it's not the case, and I'm just living my best life.
Yeah.
So anyways,
wow.
I really expanded upon what you asked me, but I feel like a lot of what I said just kind of came to me, and I want to make sure that I shared the full capacity of what you're asking me.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Incredible story. Thanks for sharing. There's a couple, I want to get into some of the things you've learned from your health, journey, process, experimentation. But there's a couple more things I want to ask you about. Did you tie up those loose ends with those investors? What happened with the money that they?
Yeah. So like I said, so one of the lawsuits was gone because Budget, fortunately, kind of as a mediator settled that, right? So that was good. The major funder that we had to reconcile with, that was the big source of funding. It was $100,000. So we went back and forth for several years, and we were actually getting ready. We kind of thought that they were posturing, which I'm pretty sure they were. What I mean by that is okay, if you get sued, right? If you're in a business and you get sued, so first of all, take a deep breath. It happens, right? Like my business coach told me this, so I'm going to give you this as a peace offering, so to speak. Welcome to the big leagues, kid. Like it happens. We live in a litigious environment, in a culture that we sue for spilling coffee on our lap. Like it's going to happen, right? At some point in time or another, or it's at least going to be the threat therein. So what happened? It's like a big game of chicken. It's like, I'm going to sue you. It's like, are you really? Yes, I'm going to sue you. Well, here's the deal. The way our system works, it actually really benefits us in a big way as business owners. To pay for just discovery alone and depositions alone, could be tens of thousands of dollars. Now, as a defendant, you don't have to pay $1 until it gets to the point where now your attorney has to go represent you in those depositions and do those various things. So, but discovery, you're probably not going to spend much money at all. You're going to turn over any documentation that they're requesting, and they're going to have to review it. So I sent them, they were accusing me of having a shell company. They're like, I guarantee you didn't have a real company, which was the dumbest. Again, I'm not Al Capone. It was the stupidest argument. So I sent them literally like thousands and thousands and thousands of documents, bank statements, checks. I had like 13,000 documents, Derek, just in digital receipts, basically, of paychecks that we had paid out over the years. It was like 13,000 documents. It's like we had a lot of transactions. So they had to sort through all that. And I'm like, there's no way they're going to go through all that. And I don't know that they did or they didn't, but they kept continuing and posturing like they were going to continue to sue, right? The thought was basically that if they kept pushing forward, we would eventually be like, okay, fine, we'll pay you X. And we didn't do that for like 3 years. And we were like in the stalemate where like nothing was happening. And they actually went beyond. So they have 6 months. Once you're served and they start doing discovery, they have 6 months to depose you. They didn't even depose me. So it's like, what are you going to bring to court? Like, you can't even put me on the stand if you don't depose me. So what are you going to bring to court? So really and truly, they weren't really trying to like actually sue me. They're suing me for $250,000 damages and all these other things, which they were never. No judge was going to award $250,000 for that. Not in an investment, right? Like that's punitive damages. That's ridiculous. So anyways, so like a month before our actual court date, my business coach was like, dude, do you really want to go through the court situation? You're going to spend, at that point now, you are going to spend money because your attorney's going to have to go and like represent and be there, and it could be long and this and that. So he's like, what would you pay them for this to go away? And I was like, I think like $30,000. He was like, go offer 15. It took 20. The fact of the matter, it's crazy. So we paid $20,000 and went away. It was going to be 250 if we lost, right? But we weren't going to lose. Anyways, it was peace of mind at this point. Is move forward, and then probably realistically, after attorney fees, we were probably going to be like 15 anyways to defend us. So just to be done. The crazy thing is, Derek, and this is how just emotionally irrational a lot of lawsuits can become. So we borrowed the money and we put up the truck that we were buying, because remember, we needed the truck to get into a standard market policy, right? That was part of what we needed to do to be in compliance. So part of the loan, the bridge loan, was we'll give you the title of the truck for collateral. I paid $22,000 for the truck, right? This was 2016. We settled in like 2019. So like almost 4 years later, we gave them $20,000 after we offered 15. They're like, okay, we'll take 20. Well, guess what? In 2016, they had the title of the truck. All they had to do was come to my office and reassume ownership of that truck, possession of that truck, and could have gone and sold it for $20,000 because I paid $22,000 like 2 months prior. So they waited almost 4 years to get literally less money than they would have gotten. The legal system's a mess. But anyway, So that's how it resolved. I laugh. It's not funny. I know it's not funny, but it was just, at the time, it was funny because this is so ridiculous. You could have got that same amount of money. And then who knows what happened to the truck? I have no idea, because we left it. I can't move it anywhere. It's not my possession, right? Like once you've defaulted on that loan, it's their responsibility to repossess it. My attorney's like, don't touch it. Like, you can't touch it legally. Like if you touch it, it's going to be like you're withholding them from their property, right? It's not yours. So we left it at the office, and I guess the guy owned the office building just towed it away. No idea what happened to it. So burned 20 grand, probably reported it as a abandoned vehicle, and they never got it. And 3 years later, they ended up getting less money. So whatever.
Wow, what a journey. Yeah, and so there's something that I'm considering, or that's coming up for me, which is like, when you're in the middle of a problem, whether it's a lawsuit or a health crisis or something, it's hard to see beyond that. It's just like all consuming you, and you're just like, this is my life forever.
Yeah.
And yet here you are, like, your health is never better. The lawsuits have been resolved. Like those problems, you probably don't even really think, especially with the lawsuit, it's probably not even in your awareness. No. But that's only 3 or 4 years after sort of the lowest point that we're talking about here. And I think it's really interesting to see how, and I think about like the things that I was worried about in high school, like, who am I going to take to prom? Like, am I going to pass this class?
Yeah.
Those are all just totally irrelevant. And almost every problem becomes irrelevant after some amount of time.
Yeah, well said.
So let's talk about how you brought yourself back to health, because I think one thing that you and I share is we like to optimize our health. We like to sort of try things that could make us better performers. We're experimenting. So yeah, we'd love to hear some of the things that you implemented along the way.
Yeah, man, that's where do we want to start with that? Goodness gracious. So I think the first thing is just there's a re-education process, right? Like we've been very indoctrinated with the standard American. It's called the SAD diet for a reason. Standard American diet, aka the stupid American diet. We've been very indoctrinated with that. Actually, something like over 80% of items at the grocery store have added sugar. Like even items that like have no business having added sugar. It's like, why would ketchup have added sugar? Like that's ridiculous, Like it's not even sweet. Like things you don't even think would have sugar.
Right.
And I'm not demonizing just sugar, although I would not eat. I do not eat artificial sugar. I do not, like, period. Don't ever. I want to say ever. That sounds really ridiculous. Every once in a while, okay, on a cheat day or something. But there's so many added things to our food. There's so many ways that our food is processed, where it's sourced from, the chemicals it's exposed to. There's just a million different ways that like we're getting it wrong. I would say there's very few ways that we get it right, meaning our like industrial food process system, right? Even the foods that we're told are healthy to a large extent. Like I could go through right now and walk with people, Derek, I'm sure you could too, through like the quote unquote, like the healthy section of the grocery store. And I could promise you like 80% of those foods I wouldn't eat, like the packaged stuff, right? Like, oh, these like healthy protein bars or like whatever. And I'm like, I would not touch that. Like it has canola oil, even Whole Foods, right? If you go to Whole Foods buffet, most of it has canola oil. Canola oil is horrendous for you, right? Like that's horrendous. It can actually penetrate your brain. It's called leaky brain. It actually penetrate your brain and start causing neurological disruption, which is going to lead to like things like brain fog and things of that nature, like really, really bad, like mood disorder, stuff like that. Really, really bad stuff. But we've been told it's like a healthy alternative. So like we're getting there. Like we're getting closer to like true health and wellness, and people are getting it really, really well, like doing it really well. But the first part is just you got to re-educate yourself, right? So you got to go through. So my perfect combination. I'm going to give some practical advice here because I'm kind of just going off the rails.
Yeah.
You need to find somebody that understands functional medicine. Now, you're going to be like, oh, well, those quacks, right? Like somebody, I can already hear them. Ideally, the perfect combination is MD, like medical doctor, that's cross-trained in funk med, which is functional medicine. That's like your perfect power rally. If you can find somebody that has an understanding of both, because there are, I really have to caution myself there because I can get a little bit on the opposite side now because I'm so I became very bitter about big pharma because it largely it was a big catalyst in my health issue, right? Huge catalyst in my health issue. Wasn't the culprit on its own, but was a big catalyst. And let me qualify that. So early age in Ohio, I had a lot of upper respiratory issues and I was given very, very strong, like strep throat and things of that nature. So I was given very strong antibiotics that depletes your gut bacteria, good and bad, doesn't discriminate, just kills everything. It's like literally like slash and burn, just destroys everything. If you don't re-indoctrinate your gut, your microbiome, which is like the healthy living organisms that live inside your body, specifically in your gut, with probiotics and prebiotics to recultivate your gut, you can get an imbalance. If that imbalance continues to worsen, like mine did, it can lead to things that's like a precursor for Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, colon cancer, like all the real nasty stuff, right? But also a litany of other things if you're not, again, digesting nutrients the way you should. So ifm.org, it's the Institute of Functional Medicine is the website, ifm.org. You can find a great person in functional medicine, but look for that MD overlap as well. So really, really good if you want to pursue that avenue. But even before then, find like 3 to 5, no more. Because if you get too far, it's going to be a convoluted message. When you're first starting out trying to find, health and wellness advice online, you're going to hear things that like contradict something else, or you're going to have taken 7,000 supplements because somebody's going to say like, oh, for this, take this, for this, take that. If you're having this, like you're going to be rubbing essential oils on your head. I mean, you're going to be doing all kind of crazy stuff. Like you're just going to be too much. So I'll give you mine. I give you the ones that I follow. Ben Greenfield is the number one person that I follow. Now, notice I didn't say Dr. Ben Greenfield. Ben Greenfield is just a freaking biohacking nerd and does all kind of crazy stuff. But Ben is, you will see quickly how committed Ben is to understanding the truth as it relates to human optimization. He's fantastic. I would say a second person in that conversation now for me is Dave Asprey. Again, not a doctor, but Dave Asprey is tremendous and gives really, really good advice. I love Dave. Dave's been on my show. Sometimes, I love you, Dave, if you ever listen to this, and I'm sorry. Sometimes Dave, I feel, he's a little out there. Let's just leave it at that. You'll see what I mean. Dr. Aaron
What do you mean?
Huh?
What do you mean out there? Because out there is good, right?
Okay. Yeah, but Dave does stuff that's almost like he's eccentric about it sometimes. Like
he's doing it to be weird.
I think maybe doing it to be weird, maybe to get, I don't know. I don't want to talk crap about Dave. I love Dave and he was great on my show and he was super nice to me. So I don't want to like whatever, but sometimes he can just be a little eccentric and it's not like it's okay. I'll give you an example. If you follow Tai Lopez, you know that Tai Lopez is actually a good entrepreneur. He actually knows what he's talking about. But he does this stuff with like these girls that are half clothed in like these cars where he's doing his videos in front of. And you're like, dude, like I would believe you and listen to you without all this fancy stuff around. Like you're doing that just to like be extra, right?
Okay. Yeah.
To some degree, Dave can do that, not with the paid models and rented cars, but to some degree, it's like I would be good with just the science. I'd be good with just the data and the information, not necessarily like you being as extra as you are about it. So it just gets a bit melodramatic for me at times. Gotcha. But he's tremendous and I love him and his advice is tremendous, right? His advice is really, really good. It's really going to help people in a big, big way. So I love him and I apologize, but that's just my constructive criticism for you, Mr. Asprey. Dr. Josh Axe, fantastic. Josh is also a friend of my podcast. I'm not personal friends with Josh, but Josh has been one of the people that have like helped me save my life. Literally, Dr. Josh Axe is tremendous. Him and then Jordan Rubin are like a combo. They like both are at Ancient Nutrition together. They're fantastic. Dr. Mark Hyman and Dr. Eric Berg. Those are phenomenal places to start that I would look into. And there's a million others, but those are the ones that are like go-to sources for me that I like really rely on, right? I know I mentioned like 5 and I just said about 6, but pick like 2 to 3 of those. Definitely put Ben Greenfield in your Rolodex. Probably start with Dr. Josh Axe in your Rolodex. Dr. Berg really explains things to such a degree of depth that you're going to be like, I understand like how this thing works in my body. So now I know kind of like why I'm doing something about it. Like what do my adrenals have to do with energy? Like he explains the process, right? Where some people just be like, well, you have weakened adrenals, so take this supplement. It's like, but okay. Right. So like Berg does a good job of explaining like why the adrenals play a vital role physiologically. Right. So I like him a lot, and Ben does a good job of that as well. So that's the first thing. Educate yourself, learn about things. Cause you're going to read things is going to be like, holy crap. Like, what am I going to eat? Like I'm doing it all wrong. Like I'm not getting adequate sleep. I have blue light in my face right before I go to bed because I'm playing video games and I'm watching Netflix. I'm sleeping too hot, or I'm eating the wrong foods at the wrong times, or I'm eating stuff that has really nasty rancid oils in it, or I'm not getting my macros right. Like there's just so many different things that you could be doing wrong.
Did your wife jump right in with you, or were you doing weird stuff and she was like, why are we doing this? Did that happen?
No. So thank God, dude. My wife actually went to Life University, which is a chiropractic school, which they're really into holistic. I hate that they have such a bad reputation. Like I hate that people are like, oh, chiropractor. Even if you look at Wikipedia, they're like pseudoscience is what they call it, which is total nonsense. Some of the most educated people you'll meet about holistic health and wellness are chiropractors. Literally, like I talk to people all the time about health and wellness. Chiropractors know their shit. They really do. She went to that school for dietetics. So she really like already was on that alternative health train to begin with. So when I met her, she was like playing around with veganism, which I don't advocate for, by the way. Veganism is terrible for you. Long-term, short-term, it could help. Long-term is terrible for you. Sorry if you're vegan, but it is. Do your research on it. I promise you it's really bad for you. So she was already doing that anyways. And she's really great about like, she's a very selfless person. So it was kind of like, well, it's a good opportunity for me to do it anyways. So she was just kind of leaning into what I was doing. So we've kind of done it together, which has made a world of a difference, by the way. Like if you have a spouse and your spouse is sick, like, dude, fully immerse yourself, because it's a great opportunity for you to make yourself healthy and like leverage that momentum that they have and like the dire situation they're in to your own benefit. So to answer your question more specifically, yeah, she jumped all in with me and like really was great about helping me come up with alternatives and like make new items and stuff like that. So it was very, very helpful. Sure, I would have got through it without her for sure.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of my own, like trying to, black out my room or like have it cool. And, my wife, different, she's like, let's just pile on all the blankets or like,
Right.
So there's definitely some stuff like we eat, we cook our own food every night and it's amazing. So it's like, sometimes we're aligned, sometimes we're not.
Yeah, no. And you have to make compromise. We have a similar situation with the sleeping situation where Kim likes the bed soft, and I'm like, no, hard and rigid, because you sleep better and you get into more quality deep sleep if your bed is rigid. And like Dave Asprey, like again, Dave being extra, he sleeps on the floor. He'll rent a hotel room and sleep on the floor because the mattress isn't up to par with what he wants. So he'll sleep on the floor.
I slept on the floor for 6 months in high school. I don't know where I got the idea, and I was like, I'm just going to be such a badass, and it was actually really comfortable. And then I went back
for you. Well, think about it. Like our you have to go back to ancestral knowledge, right? Like we were constructed not to sleep on a therapeutic. What are those called? A therapeutic.
Posturepedic.
Whatever they're called. Everybody's gonna know. I'm having a brain fart right now. Therapeutic, whatever they're called. That's not what we're like. We're sleeping on the ground, right? Like that's what we did. So these like soft, like cloud-like beds that we have, like that's not ancestrally what our bodies, like our body does micro evolve, but it takes time. And the world has changed so rapidly, with just everything in such a short period of time, that our bodies just haven't fully adapted to that. So it's not wrong to sleep on the floor. But yeah, anyway, so we do have those little micro discrepancies with us as well. The next thing I would say is testing. So, God, one of my biggest pet peeves, man, and I've made the mistake myself, so I totally get it, is test, don't guess, right? So some people are like, oh, well, I have this symptom, so I'm going to go, and this is because of our Western system of medicine, right? You go to the doctor, you're like, doc, I have a sore throat. He goes, well, okay, open your, stick your tongue out, blah, and he looks at your mouth. He says, oh, you got strep, and then go take this, and you'll be good, right? Like you'll be fine. Take 2, call me in the morning kind of situation. But that's what we do. We're little guinea pigs for like pharmaceutical drugs. And then there's not real, like, okay, what was it caused from? Or like, okay, we know it's bacterial or viral, whatever, but like other things, right? Crohn's. Well, how did we get there? Like, that's not bacterial. It's not viral. Okay. We know we like, how did it happen? And then like, is there anything we can do to prevent it? Or is there anything that happens leading up to that to prevent it or to reverse it? Right. So there's a lot that you can learn and glean from testing. And this is the metaphor that I gave, and I hope this resonates with people. It's like driving around and not looking at your dash on your car. You don't know if you have any gas. You don't know if you need an oil change. You don't know if your check engine light's on. You have no idea. You don't know, right? Because you don't know. So once a year, I would recommend some sort of testing. For one, a stool test. So Viome is fantastic for like a DIY. So it's V like Victor, Viome. You collect a sample, you send it in, they come back, and what they do is they tell you like, here's what's going on in your gut. And it'll tell you.
Is that microbiome like species in your gut, or is it like
yeah. So it does a lot of different things, right? So it'll a lot of different measurements, not just the bacteria in terms of bacterial health, but like butyrate and all these other things that like you have no idea what they are. The beautiful thing about that is if you go and do like a Direct Labs test, or if you go do Genova Labs, or like these are all like gold standard labs, right? But they really require somebody in Funk Med to analyze them for you. And that can cost thousands of dollars, right? Like, so between Kim and I, we're going to spend like $10,000 on labs this year, just labs alone, not working with a doctor for interpretation, just the labs alone.
Wow.
So they're very, very expensive. Now we're so like sophisticated in what we do that we know we're going to ROI that, but I can't reasonably ask people to go out and do that right out of the gates. So Viome is like the consumerized version of like understanding what's going on under the hood of your car, of you, the car, assuming you're the car, right? It's going to tell you a variety of different things, but it's also going to tell you foods. So you can have food sensitivities that are causing issues. The way you're metabolizing food, the way you're converting things that you're eating and putting in your body can have an effect on you, right? So some people are like, man, I'm just really tired after I eat X food. Well, you might be having an inflammatory response to that, or your body might not be capable because of the colony of bacteria in your gut might not be capable currently of processing things the way you need them to, right?
Like lactose or gluten or something like that.
Sure. So it's going to give you like a real-time read of like how you're absorbing nutrients. The reason I say is because I always tell people this. I'm like, you're like, well, how does the gut have anything to do with like my brain fog? Right. And there's a really long explanation scientifically for why that's the case. Like you can get into the vagus nerve and like all the nerve endings inside your gut and how it communicates with your brain and like all that stuff. But fundamentally speaking, here's the deal. Everything, health and wellness starts in the gut, because everything you do, like I said, if you're not getting the nutrients out into the places it needs to go, right? Like imagine a plant that can't absorb water, right? It's going to die, right? So that's your body, like your gut is the root in that equation that fuels everything else. It gives it what it needs to function the way they should. So yes, it's not everything, but you can't accomplish health without it, right? It's just necessary. So you need to really get a real-time view of what's going on there. The second thing I would say on top of that, if you want to go a step further, and I do recommend this, is once a year, blood work. Now, you could get really nuanced with that, get really granular, but just as a basic, go to a place. I have one here locally in Austin called Any Labs Test Now. Find a local lab facility that does not require you to have a doctor's note, and get what's called a male comp or a female comp, which stands for comprehensive. So it's going to give you all your vitamin and nutrient counts. It'll give you your white blood cell count. It's going to give you your thyroid, your TSH, which again, TSH is not granular enough for my liking. It's too macro, but it's still going to give you a good idea about what's going on and if there's something really wrong with what's going on in your body. So those two, with the stool and with the blood test, should get you in the right direction. And the good thing about both, right, specifically with the Viome, is it gives you advice, but also Viome gives you like a 110-page report that includes a meal plan. So it's going to tell you like what your superfoods are, but it's also going to tell you foods you need to avoid. So you might be having an it's an IG3, I believe, which is an inflammatory response, right? And they're foods that you need to avoid for a period of time. So like 3 months you need to cycle off of. And the reason we develop these sensitivities is because we're not hunter gatherers anymore, right? So like you can eat strawberries year round. Well, our ancestors couldn't do that because strawberries were there. It's a seasonal fruit, right? So you couldn't eat strawberries in the middle of December. Like that's not possible, right? Because that's not when they grow. So now we can eat these things year round because it's mass produced. So people just eat the same things all the time. So your body starts to develop sensitivities to those. Eventually, potentially, you become allergic to them if you continue to eat those foods. But more importantly, it causes an inflammatory response. And what we talk about with inflammation before, inflammation is a huge enemy. And for people that are more into the vanity purpose of looking good, most people that I see have inflammation problems, not body weight problems. More importantly, a lot of people that carry extra weight, it's due to hormonal issues or it's due to gut health issues. Some of your gut bacteria actually dictates how and where you retain weight. Some of the hormone problems do the same. The reason you can develop extra weight around your waistline is because your body is trying to protect your major organisms because you have problems going on. So for those that don't give a crap about optimal health, but want to look good for beach season, I just gave you 2 reasons to do that because those things not function the way they should. I don't care how much you kill yourself at the gym. It's not going to happen for you. I don't care how much you lower your caloric intake. It's not going to happen for you because you have a problem that hasn't been reconciled and hasn't been rectified. It's going to continue to allow you or cause you to store weight in those places or inflammation in those places that are undesirable, in addition to the litany of health issues that it causes with your performance and productivity and overall sense of well-being.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. My wife she told me one time, she was like, when you see one of these old guys with the gut that's like sticking out farther, but they're like skinny everywhere else.
And no butt, no legs, skinny everywhere else.
Yeah, yep. It's like an inflammatory response.
It's a deformity.
Yeah.
Where the human body was not constructed to look like that. It's a deformity. Not from birth. It's because of lifestyle.
Yeah. So
I'm gonna get in big trouble for what I just said, by the way. I know calling people that have extended stomach a deformity, but really, if we're being honest, that's what it is.
Yeah. So I want to go back to this moment when you were talking about you were propping yourself up, starting the podcast with your hand, and there was still pending litigation, but you were starting the podcast, and your wife was. Where were you on your sort of rehabbing yourself, your health journey when you were first starting the podcast?
Yeah, man. So I was down to 5 foods that I could eat, and without that inflammation. So we didn't have the testing because at that point, again, things were not good financially. I mean, we had the original test, the labs that we did when I got diagnosed, right? But we didn't have anything to follow. This was like a year. So your labs are good for like 6 months, and then they're considered expired. Like it changes so much. Yep. Your gut changes every 90 days. It's completely different. So we knew that we were drawing off of assumptions. What I say before, test, don't guess, right? I was guessing. So we did process elimination. So we did an elimination diet. I was down to 5 foods that didn't cause like either a ridiculous energy swing, mood swing, crazy. Like we could see my gut like distending after I ate certain foods that I couldn't handle. Like it literally would just start blowing up and like with brain fog, and I'd be irritable. It was just terrible.
Wow.
So I started losing weight like crazy. I was like at 185. Before then I got down to like 152, like in a matter of like 2 months, maybe. Right. I was eating strawberries, blueberries, avocado, coconut oil, and like bone broth. That's all I could have. Mm-hmm. So I did that, and that would kind of keep me in my lane, at least to a degree. The problem with those elimination diets, though, is that your gut needs vibrancy, like it needs diversity, right? Because those different bacteria, they're fed off of, like I said before, like if you eat the same foods all the time, you're going to develop sensitivity. So be careful about those restrictive diets. If you're going to do it, if you're going to like, oh, I'm having problems with this, then like do it sparingly, but don't just eliminate it forever, right? Because that's not good for you. So that's where I was in terms of diet. And then in terms of overall, like what I was doing with health, just trying to rest as much as I could. But really
why did you start a podcast when you were trying just to rest and recover?
So I think that there's a part, I know I mentioned this before, Derek, but I was like, I didn't feel like I had a lot of use to the world at this point. Right. And so I think it was more like I had no intention of starting an online business. it was really starting that podcast as being therapeutic, right? Like it, service to others, telling other people what I had learned from this experience, almost like journaling. It was like vocal journaling. But then also it was really therapeutic for me to talk to other entrepreneurs, because one of the things that I learned immediately was how many other entrepreneurs had been through hell way worse than what I was going through in a lot of ways.
Oh, geez.
Right. Like unbelievably horrifying scenarios and situations. And at the time, I think sometimes the big mistake we make as humans is we really will retreat and go inward when we're like ashamed about something or embarrassed, or like in a weird predicament or situation, and like assume that, you know, we're the only person in our minds, right? Not vocalizing this, that we're the only person that's ever gone through this. I'm like, I'm the only person that's ever like, you know, I can't show my face. I can't do this. Like, I remember I kept thinking this. I was like, what if I run into the people that are suing me? Like, what if I see them at the store, or like their family or something, right?
Yeah.
I knew who I was. So yeah, man, for me, it was therapeutic. It was just putting something out there. And I tell people this often, like one of the best things you can do, obviously outside of like learning and educating myself, watching YouTube videos about health and wellness, probably what I did most of my day, and like from the bed, watching videos about health and wellness. And that also gave me hearing people's stories, like Jordan Rubin, who was like literally dying. His family spent like $150,000 traveling the globe looking for, he developed Crohn's in college, his freshman year of college. And like he literally died on a doctor's like bed in like Russia or something crazy. Well, reading stories like that was just really inspiring for me, because I'm like, I can do this. Like Jordan did it, and look at him. He's made it, right? He got out of this, and like he's better off for it now. But then also too on the entrepreneurship side, doing that as well, right? So there's two fundamental things, and I really believe this, and Tony Robbins says this: progress, fundamental things as far as human satisfaction and fulfillment. Progress, so feeling like you're moving forward, and service to others. You know, like of your hierarchy of needs, there's others, but those are the top two, right? That like we have to have, or we just feel like we're of no use to anybody, right? So I feel like I was making progress because I'm watching these videos and I'm like doing these things. I'm tweaking my diet and I'm starting to feel a bit better. And I'm like, you know, whatever, like slowly, albeit extremely slowly, way slower than I wanted it to happen. But then also too, now I'm like having conversations with like Damons and stuff like that. And so despite the fact that I felt so bad, that 1 hour of the week was like the highlight of my week, because it was like, I'm making progress. Like I'm having these conversations and I'm watching my downloads and I'm watching the engagement on social media. And in that season of my life, just feeling like something was going in that direction. And then being a wisdom worker for my wife and like watching her business explode because I was able to like help her. I don't take credit for her success. Like she did it. I could not teach a dog to do what she's done, right? Like she did it on her own and she would have done it with or without me. But providing utility to her and then seeing the success she had also made me feel like I was progressing in my life, right? And then the service to others. So I'm doing I'm feeding two birds with one seed, right? I'm feeling like I'm progressing because I'm getting these amazing guests on my show and I'm building this amazing platform. But then also too, I know that these people are benefiting from what I'm saying because I see the downloads, right? I see that my show is trending, so I know I'm reaching people. So kind of accomplish both things, right, at the same time. So I started volunteering. That's a good thing you can do as well. Not till later. This was later on. This was in 2017. But anything you can do to focus on those two if you're in like a really dark place and like in a really like rebounding period, that's why. So I honestly, the podcast was a blessing from God. Like it was a complete surprise. But man, that show really, in a lot of ways, I don't want to say saved my life. That's maybe a little bit too drastic. But in a lot of ways, it saved my sanity. That's for damn sure. I would not be where I'm at now if it weren't for what I did with that podcast, for sure.
Man, you got some really juicy open shares here. Thank you. What's I wanted to ask you about your wife's business, and now I know you're mentoring a lot of entrepreneurs, you're coaching. Perhaps that was one of like the early opportunities for you to sort of contribute to someone else's business.
Yeah, it was.
I was just curious, like your role in her business growth.
Yeah, the thing that was cool, man, is that I think so. I hit my first million at 27, just before my 28th birthday. I know we collected our millionth dollar. So broke seven figures right before my 28th birthday. And then Kim did it like at 29. So it's one thing to do it once, right? I had a lot of quote unquote friends that I'd actually, even in some cases, Derek, I'd even like employed them because they were in like a bad situation. Like they were trying to start a business and things weren't going well, One of them had a situation. He actually lives here in Austin now, which is ironic because we both ended up in Austin. He did something wrong with his taxation. I don't know what the case was. He was about to get evicted. And so I gave him a job. This is when the moving company was really thriving. I gave him a job. I created a job for him, right? And I found out after I got sick and lost the business that like he made some disparaging comments where he was like, "Oh, well, Chris was only successful because he was taking Vyvanse, right? The ADD medication." I'm like, "No, that was a crutch. That was just helping me get by, right? Like it wasn't like I was like, taking nootropics. Like it is a nootropic actually, but it wasn't like I was optimal, healthy, and thriving, and like somehow like it was just ridiculous." So he made a lot of disparaging comments. So you kind of found out who your friends were and stuff like that. Anyways, the bottom line is this: there was definitely a thought, whether I wanted to acknowledge it or not. There were people that made comments that definitely was kind of aligning with what I was thinking about myself. That it was a fluke. That what I did, like wasn't worth anything because I lost it because I had a business and that wasn't a business anymore. So I was kind of like, again, the imposter syndrome, like I'll never achieve what I've achieved again. I'll never reach these heights again, what have you. So with Kim, it was kind of like an opportunity to like what I perceive to be to redeem myself. Right. And then also I'm launching this podcast. And so like, if you actually care about the stuff you put out in the world, which some people don't, I think we all know that, but I do. And so I am like giving people advice. And for a long time, that's why I only did interviews. I wouldn't do a solo show because I was too embarrassed about what like I didn't have anything to offer anybody. Right. I speak very confidently now because I've just grown and matured, but there were a lot of insecurities there. And I wouldn't even do a solo episode because I was too embarrassed about what I would say. And if it was like going to get people in trouble like it did me. So with Kim, it was like, okay, I have a chance to see if like this was a fluke. And as I started to see her succeed with somewhat the same recipe of success that we had done, not only could I crystallize it because I was looking at what she was doing from a different vantage point, but then seeing the exact same methodologies and the exact same approach and the exact same mindset about starting a business, seeing it work was like, okay, we really did do something special, right? It wasn't a fluke, like it was real, right? And now we've helped countless other people do that through her business. So, yeah, man, it was great to see for me to have like that different seat. And then also too, and this was great for her, she was always kind of like in my shadow, right? Like I was the big successful entrepreneur and like was really, Chris's business. And then Kim was like doing the social media stuff and like, oh yeah, well, Kim does social media. She plays on Facebook. Cause at this point, Facebook marketing was not a big deal. Like people like, what do you do? How does that work? And so it was cool for her. It was cool for me to see her get the recognition that she really deserved because she's a badass in her own right. Like very, 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 she's a very, very sophisticated and very, very strategic entrepreneur. Like she is a badass. And so it was really cool for me to also see like her to be in the spotlight a little bit. I have a big voice and I say a lot and she's a little bit more quiet and reserved than I am. So it was really cool to see her get that recognition as well. And that fortunately it's been a blessing because we've been able to synergistically work together. Right. So like we fortunately complement each other, not just in our personal lives, but also in our businesses. And we're able, like my strengths are complement her, weaknesses and vice versa. So yeah, man, it really, in a lot of ways, it really validated the things I did, but also helped me redeem myself, perceivingly redeem myself. Not that I needed redemption. But then also really kind of allow in a multiplicity of ways. It really was to the best benefit of both of us. And it allowed her to have a lot of confidence in herself too. I think even her parents for a long time thought that, she was successful because of me. And that, oh, well, Chris must be the brain behind her business and stuff. And so I think a lot of people thought that. So for her to really like step up and be like, no, Chris is out right now. Like Chris is not running a business at all. I'm like, it's on me. And for her to run with that, it was like a really proud moment for her. And I'm really happy that she had that.
Yeah, that's I like to hear that. It's making me think of my friend who he was a decent pro triathlete, and he married this woman who is actually even faster than he was, and she's a woman, so it's like doubly impressive. And so he was like, she's out there winning marathons and triathlons, and he was like, it just takes the pressure off me. Like I don't have to be the best athlete anymore. He's like just staying home with the kid while his wife goes racing. So yeah, it kind of takes the pressure off. And whenever my wife, she right now she's just with the kids, but she's every once in a while she'd be like, I'm thinking about this business idea.
Nice.
and she's like, I want to open a, home goods store or a yoga retreat center or a, whatever it is. I'm like, go on.
Yeah. It's such a blessing, man, with, if you look at where the world has trended, it's almost impossible to have a single income earning family, right? Like things cost, obviously this is contingent upon where you live in the world, but for all intents and purposes, man, like to really live comfortably, you pretty much both have to be doing something. And I think it's been a beautiful thing to see this opportunity specifically for women, to be able to have their cake and eat it too, right? Like to work from home, to work online, to have an online business, and to also be involved in their kids' lives, right? And so I think it's an amazing. I love the free market for that reason. It just has created this opportunity, primarily females, right? Like that's who we serve, primarily online female business owners. It's a beautiful thing, beautiful thing that they can make really good income, not feel like they're having to sacrifice in their career, but also taking what they learned when they were in the workforce, post kids, and then be able to continue to use the things that they learned, right? Like I have friends that are valedictorians and they're still using that in some capacity in their business now, even though they can't work, in the corporate 9 to 5 because they want to be involved with their kids' lives. So I think it's a beautiful thing. And I'm always advocating for more women to start businesses for that very reason.
So are you referring to Startup U is teaching your clientele is mostly women?
We're about 50-50.
Okay.
As far as my audience is like 55-45. So yeah, but my wife now on her side with the Business Lounge, which is the name of her online membership program, it teaches people to launch, grow, and scale online businesses. There's a few men in there, myself included, but primarily it's majority women, and that's a big. I mean, she has over 35,000 customers that she services, and it's primarily, I would say 34,000 at least are women. So it's a good bit of women in that community that are actively online building their businesses.
Yeah. Wow.
Or at least trying to.
Super cool. Okay. Yeah. Well, I didn't even realize that you guys had complementary sort of offers like that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I had one more sort of topic or line of conversation, which is something I picked up off of your Twitter. You can tell me if you want to go here or not. But when I was scoping out your various social media,
where are we going here with this?
Well, I wanted to get your comments on, because I think I saw something. You were leaving some social media platforms. There's this tweet you had like, okay, we feel like big tech has too much power over our lives. Yes. Like, what can we do? Okay, we can leave big tech, but as online entrepreneurs, we're like relying on them for bringing in customers. And I had this experience where I typed in the wrong word around the election or something, and I was sort of shadow banned, and I have no idea exactly what it was. And I was like, hey, what? They didn't get any notification. All of a sudden, Facebook just wasn't working for me anymore. Yeah. And that felt very sinister in a way. So yeah, just wanted to get your thoughts on as far as someone who's using online business, but also like, wary of the sort of centralized power now of sort of these social media companies.
Dude, we're in such a weird place. It sucks because a lot of the comments that I've made, specifically on Twitter and on my personal Facebook, which I think we're friends on Facebook now too, would lead you to believe that I'm in one party, quite literally political party. And then some things I say where I'm like, I eat like a hippie. You're like, oh, well, he's in this group. And it's just like, we can't, it's like, we're in such a space now where we like, can't just be a person. It's like, well, it's like, you have to be in one of these two sides or else you're whatever. Like if you're in this camp, you're a white supremacist, or if you're in this camp, you're, a lefty. It's like, why can't we just be a commonsensical human being that has a brain and their own thoughts? And so unfortunately, that battle has extended onto these big tech platforms. And there's an entire reason for why I think that's the case, unfortunately. But I think we're in some really dangerous territory where there is not the freedom of exchange of ideas like there once was, nor is there a platform where that's trying to get you in trouble here because I know it's going to be on YouTube. That's not accepted, welcomed, tolerated, right? And it's very, very terrifying. I've looked back historically speaking to kind of figure out like where things trended, and usually things will realign and adjust themselves. Albeit we can't assume that's going to happen, and that's where I feel a lot of conflict. Maybe you do as well. Of like, I can't expect that like things are going to continue to be the way they are because I desire it to be, right? Like I can't just sit back and be like, oh well, it'll sort itself out. Like I have to do something, and then I find myself not knowing what to do about that. So a big conflict for me internally and a lot of business owners is, and we talk to our students about this all the time, a lot of our students, Derek, almost all of them, literally, are uniformly being like, I hate that I have to use social media to market my business. Like I hate it, right? So I think a couple things are going to happen. I think there's something called section 230, right? Which basically gives social media like impunity to basically do whatever they want to be, right? If that gets removed and they're held to the account of being basically what a publisher is, like New York Times, New York Post, Washington Post, whatever, right? Then things are going to get real hairy because they're basically every single person on the platform is going to be viewed as like the same as a contributor, right? Like you wrote a piece for the New York Times, right?
Okay.
Maybe not to that degree, but they can be held accountable for the things you say as a publisher. But at the same time, they can't also restrict what people are saying, but there's weird stuff that happens. And then you have, and this has been the argument, if you've listened to a lot of like the Jack Dorsey's and Vijaya, I think is her name, that one of their lead like legal representatives there, if she's not the lead. She basically is like, we can't just recognize US law because we operate globally. Right. Like, so the law here might not align and we can't just assume that like, okay, we're going to follow US law because it might be different in Japan or it might be different in Russia or what have you. And like, we operate globally, not just in one country. So it's really, really weird. What I think is going to happen is this. So either section 230 is going to get repealed, going to get removed. Those protections for social media is going to get repealed. And that's going to be really hairy. That's going to be a really, like, who knows what's going to happen at that point, because then being an advertiser on those platforms, they're really going to be responsible for the things that you post, the things that you say. So I can see it getting extremely rigid. It's already really rigid, and you can already get your account deactivated. In fact, we're seeing like 10% of ad accounts get deactivated for pretty much no reason at all. The way their AI works is it pretty much will scrape things that you say. So for example, on Facebook, you can't even say the word you in your ad copy. So like if you said something like, I'm going to help you, make $1 million in your business. Well, that's going to get flagged immediately.
Really?
Right? Oh yeah, for sure. So for one, it's a promise. You can't write anything that's an implied promise. So if I tell you you're going to make $1 million, that's implied promise. You can't even show before and after pictures. If you like lost weight and that's what you were implying as a promise, like I'll help you do this, you cannot run an ad around that. You can't do it. Right? You can run an after picture, but you can't do before afters. There's all these rules. And the problem is that Facebook in particular, Facebook is the best as an advertising cap. Well, let me qualify this. It's the best for conversions. So like Pinterest, I can get 12-cent clicks. It's unbelievable. But conversion optimization is not what Facebook is, because Facebook is now being revealed to be somewhat an invader of our privacies. And they know more about you. And even actually the CIA has actually even said this. Facebook knows more about you than the bureaus do, than literally the 3-letter organizations do in the government. That's the amount of data they collect, and so I didn't have a problem with that at first when Facebook was just following you on their platform, right? Because if you want to use Facebook as a free service, you are acknowledging that you're giving them permission to look at what you do on that platform. The problem is now it extends beyond into not just other areas of the internet, but also your hardware, right? Where you had these like agreements between big tech, both hardware and in the digital software space of like, I'm going to literally, like, whether you believe your phone's listening to you or not, but there are extensions of which I'm going to track where you go physically and all these various aspects of it's really, really invasive. They continue to aggregate that data about you to build a profile. That profile is what marketers use to be able to really get specific about targeting you. No one in the world does that better than Facebook. The reason Google, people don't know this, the reason Google launched Google Plus was because they realized that Facebook was kicking their ass in advertising, right? So that's why your Google AdSense, right? You're spending money on Google, AdWords rather. AdSense is was with YouTube. Why your AdWords could be like 30 cents a click, because they can't get as nuanced and specific as what Facebook can get because of the sheer data and the intricate data that Facebook collects about you, right? So it's been tremendous for marketers. The problem is they've almost kind of turned their backs on the little guy. They've really been like, no, we're not going to allow this. We're not going to allow this. And more importantly, they're not transparent at all. So they don't give you a list of things and do's and don'ts. If you make a mistake on Pinterest, for example, and they deny one of your ads, they'll tell you exactly why. And they'll actually have a representative get on the phone with you to tell you what you did about it or what you can do about it. Right. Mm-hmm. Facebook, you're lucky. If you even send a message to your Facebook, quote unquote ad representative, it's a bot for sure. Like to get to a person at Facebook is almost impossible. Now you may be like, well, I talked to a Facebook ad rep on the phone before. Well, here's the deal. That person is trying to help you run more ads to make more money. We were told this, they are not allowed to speak across divisions. They can't talk to the people that actually will get you out of Facebook jail if you end up in Facebook jail. So they're just trying to get you to buy more ads. So it's almost impossible. They can't even refer you to anybody on that side of things, right? Maybe this is more than what people bargain for. I just want to give you full context of what's happening, what's going on, kind of the problem. So people are getting banned. People are getting kicked off. They're having their pages throttled back. Organic reach is dead. It's a pay-to-play platform, right? Like you're going to have to pay for ads. And so anyway, so a lot of our clients and customers are like, well, what are we going to do? So here's what we've been advocating for. Own your own assets. This is something you should have been doing anyways, right? So what I mean by that, when you put content out on somebody else's platform, you're building their platform, right? Like you have to continue. It's borrowed real estate. So think about it this way: owned versus borrowed real estate, right? If I have somebody on my email list, I own that. That's my asset. If the email service provider says I can't advertise with them anymore, great. Then I just export my list and I upload it somewhere else and I continue to market to those people. My blog, my website, it's on the internet. There's nobody that can shut it down. Now, Google can say they're not going to have it anymore, but DuckDuckGo might still have it. And then it's fine. And I own that. I can change it. There's no algorithms that are going to pop up in the middle of the night and say hey, you can't do this anymore. You can't say this, or all of a sudden now you're not going to make as much money as you're making before, right? Like they can't do those things. We advocated this for years. Focus on your assets. What does that mean, right? Email list. Money's in the email anyways. Your conversions are coming from your email list anyways. I said that and some guy blasted me the other day. He's like, you don't know what you're talking about. Everybody has an email so they can start social media. It's like, well, tell me how that goes for you. Look at the current climate. And then also long form content. So like your blog, right? People are like blog, bleh. But think about it this way: article. How many articles have you read today? Probably on ESPN. You might have been on CNN. You might have been on MSNBC. You might have been on Fox. Who knows? Like reading things. Those are effectively blogs, right? So search rich content. So whatever you're doing, if you're using borrowed real estate, any other platform that hosts your content, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, podcast, whatever, make sure in some capacity you have a plan to drive that to your real estate, right? Use borrowed real estate to drive to your owned real estate. Okay. And then from that point forward, use the borrowed real estate content you're putting out and convert it into stuff that can be on your home base, meaning your owned real estate. So a lot of people, they don't even take their podcast and then repurpose that on their website in the form of a blog, so that if people are searching for something 10 years from now and they find this episode with, Derek and myself, some kind of synopsis of it, great. But if Apple Podcast says Derek can't be on our platform anymore, guess what? You'll never hear this episode again. It'll be gone forever, right? It's gone. So you have to focus on what can I control? And then how can I then first and foremost, what are the areas that I control? And then how do I convert the traffic that I'm already getting? Because everybody's focused on new leads, but focus on converting the leads that you're getting. Because a lot of people are like, I'm driving 1,500 people to my site every night. It's not enough. Okay, well, how do you convert like 5% of that? Because if you're converting 5% of 1,500 people on your website, you've got a business, probably a thriving one, depending on what you charge. But they're like, oh, well, I need more likes and I only have 7,000 subscribers. And it's like, dude, yeah, but you're neglecting the people that that's like owning a donut shop and being concerned about the guy that's spinning the sign in the parking lot instead of the people that are in the store. It makes no sense. You're like, oh yeah, well, 7 people just came into the donut shop while you're focused on the guy in the street, not pulling in new cars to the parking lot, flipping his little sign. But meanwhile, you've got people at the front desk and nobody's serving them donuts and collecting their money, right? Like that's your first focus. Then you can focus on the guy spinning the sign and focusing on enhancing that marketing. So we get that completely wrong. And we're focused on all these bells and whistles, you shiny bells and whistles online. So those are the core fundamental mistakes that I see is converting, owning your own assets, and then using borrowed real estate as an ancillary aspect of what you do, right? To further, let's clean up the bucket. Let's make sure that bucket's converting on your site. And then how do we use that to continue to fill the bucket once we know it's converting and optimized the way that it should be? That would be my biggest advice. And then what's going to happen with social media, I think, is the internet is going to get very diversified. So I think what you're going to see is you're going to see interest-based platforms emerge, right? So like you have these mega platforms right now. And I think that humans have a fundamental need to be understood and feel a sense of belonging. The problem is that when you have these massive platforms with millions and millions and millions of users, there's so much polarity, there's so much differences, so many different inputs that you're taking in that leave you without a sense of belonging and being understood, that the natural inclination is to feel uncertainty. Uncertainty feels to anger, anger leads to hate. And that's why you're seeing all this rhetoric and all this hate and all this divisiveness on these platforms, right? That is my theory. That is not like a proven thing at all. That is just from my brain. I did not read this from anything. It's just purely my opinion.
So it's almost like the news feed, because we're already sort of siloed by the algorithm,
right?
Will become just like different platforms.
They're already pushing groups. If you notice Facebook, they're really trying to push groups because they're going to segment you down into your interests to keep you away from things that aren't to a certain degree, right? And that's a really tough thing. But I think you'll also see other platforms emerge where it's like, it won't be designated as such, right? It's not going to be like, and this is already happening, by the way. So if you look at Facebook versus Instagram versus TikTok, right now, we've already self-aligned ourselves with not only like-minded groups, but similar demographics. So like older demographic now is on Facebook. You're not going to see anybody under the age of 30 primarily on Facebook. Moreover, you're going to see those people on Instagram, but younger than that, like younger than 25, like teenagers, they're on TikTok. So you're already seeing that happen where you have vibrancy and diversity of these various platforms. In the future, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of platforms, right? You're going to see maybe some of the big boys die off or completely have to reinvent themselves and niche down even further, right? Of being like, this is what this is for. And then you'll see others that'll populate that. It's not like they're not going to actively market themselves as such. Like TikTok doesn't be like, we're for teenagers, like they don't say that. It's just happened that way. So I think you'll see diversity across the internet where you have these platforms where people engage and they kind of self-identify and kind of position themselves in accordance with their values and beliefs and like-minded people and such. I think that's what you're going to see, which the good thing is, and this is where if you're a marketer, have some faith and some confidence, just know it's going to be a little rocky to get there. It's easier to market on a niche platform than it is on a broad platform. Because if you're on Facebook, you have to get really specific telling Facebook what you want, because at one point there was half of the population of the world was on Facebook. It probably is roughly about the same now. Imagine having to put forth criteria in terms of your targeted advertising, right? To your niche audience, to your specific ideal client avatar. Hey, Facebook, go find me people like this. Well, here's the deal on TikTok. If that's who your audience is teenagers that are looking for whatever it is you're selling, little, I don't want to say fidget spinners, but that's so like, that shows how out of touch I am.
Well, no, I was actually talking with someone. One of the things I do is actually, I don't have one on my desk, a piece of moldavite. It's sort of a rare meteorite. Yeah. And I was talking with my supplier and she's like, the world supply of moldavite has been snapped up because of this TikTok trend that happened in the last couple of months.
See?
And I was like, that's crazy.
So if you know those trends, in the future, it's going to be easy because you'll be able to like identify my target market hangs out here, right? Like this is where they are. And so it'll be easier to reach those people if that's who your target audience is. So again, have a little bit of faith. I think, and the good thing about this is that everybody's calling for the government to like regulate and make sure they can't do those things. And I do think that's important. Like, I do think that's important. I think it's going to get rocky. We do have to fight and battle for whatever side you're on. I don't give a shit. It's about fairness and about common sense. Like we can find common ground with common sense. But in the future, what's going to happen is the market's going to regulate itself, right? Like Facebook's going to quit the bullshit, or whoever's going to quit the bullshit, because guess what? They're losing users to these other platforms, these competitors that are popping up that are feeding into other places. Now, the problem is that people have popped up like Parler, and now you've got this like collusion between, again, the big hardware companies and also then, the big tech platforms like Facebook and so on and so forth. That's a problem, and that's monopolistic, and that's where we have to step in at a government level and not allow that to happen. But you're going to see things shaken up, and I think as a marketer, again, focus on the essentials first, and then weather the storm, use the platforms that are out there to the best capacity you can. If you get kicked off, you get kicked off. Again, it's not the end of the world. Just create a new account. It's not a big deal. And it's not that it's a pain in the ass, but you can do it. use what's available now. Don't take a stance of like, well, I'm just not going to market because blah. And I did this, by the way. I was like, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to boycott. Sure, but then my business is going to suffer as a result because that's the best possible outlet for me right now, right? So like, you can't be a martyr for your own cause. But then the minute, I'm telling you, Derek, the minute that something pops up that's more viable for what I do that reaches my audience at scale, I'm done. I will never spend another dollar with Facebook. So you just set it up in a way right now that it makes you money, even though you know you're benefiting them, until something else more viable pops up.
Yeah. And, you know, for any future entrepreneur listening to you say that, like, you're saying like, hey, I'm a future customer. Like, all you need to do is build the thing and I will come. So
yeah.
And I'm also wondering, it seems like there's some that, you know, with the sort of blockchain decentralized movement, there's got to be something a solution that will arise.
Yeah. No, on all fronts, man. I'm telling you, it's going to be a weird 10 years in that sense, because you're going to see a lot. You're going to see establishment on both sides really be like, holy crap, the world is changing. And the people are kind of like coming up with their own sense of regulating themselves and creating these new things and like digital assets. Like, what? So it's going to be, I'm telling you, man, it's going to be a wild 10 years, but I do think that it's for the better. And I'm glad to see things happening the way they are, because it does put things in check. And it's interesting. It's a fascinating, and here's the deal too. This is really important. This is when people get rich. People get rich when there's turmoil, right? If you look back historically speaking, I think it was something like over the last, this is from Money Master the Game by my guy, Tony Robbins, but he talks about in the market, it was Unshakable, one of the two. I think Unshakable is like the short version of Money Master the Game, but just like updated. But anyways, the bottom line is he says that like over the last 75 years, or I think it was like 25 years or something. Anyway, several decades, right? The highest earning days, you would have made more money in 10 days, in just 10 days, than you did like any other time throughout those decades, right? And the reason was because, and all of them aligned this way, it was like the day after a major crash is when people made their most money. Like those 10 days alone would have made you more than those decades of investing in those 10 days alone. And it was because of the fact that when things are crazy, there's crazy opportunities. So people, smart people, right? People that are focused on, you know, really building wealth, they swoop in when they see opportunities, when there's crazy fluctuation, right, in the market, or there's crazy, like just wildness. People freak out and they get emotional. And then there's people that are strategic and think about, okay, where do I capitalize on this? Like, what can I do? Right. And that, so be that type, right? Like don't fall into the hysteria that a lot of the media wants to promulgate and people are falling into. Like, be smart, be calculated, and figure out like, okay, how do I navigate myself and my family and my business through this? How do I find the new opportunity? How do I find what's going to be the next big thing and position myself to ride that wave? That's I'm telling you right now, this is the biggest opportunity in human history to do just what I just said.
Love it. This is gold. This whole thing is gold.
Sweet, man.
Anything we've covered a lot of your journey. Anything I haven't asked you about that you want to share before we wrap here?
Yeah, the only thing that I said before we get started that I definitely want to make sure that we address was type A people. Just make sure that you're introducing counterbalance in your life.
Oh yeah,
it's a concept that I learned from Gary Keller. It's from my favorite business book of all time called The One Thing. Basically had a similar story. I talked about people that have had similar stories to me and how it really inspired me, had the same thing, like bust his butt, grew a really cool company. Actually, if you don't know Gary Keller, Keller Williams, the real estate company, the real estate mega power, that's his company. And they started here in Austin and they were just a local real estate company. Now they're what they are today. Had a similar experience to what I had, and then really introduced himself to the concept of counterbalance. And so what that means is like, the idea of balance is very sacrificial. And a lot of people don't commit to balance, or they don't get it right because they're like, well, I'm not in balance. I can't be this extreme because I got to get back to balance. And it's like, no, the magic happens when you're in extremes. It really does. Like, I'm not going to dismiss that. It really does. Like when you really focus on something and you're really locked in and obsessed about it, like you can move mountains. The key is to make sure and recognize when I'm in one of those really big extremes is to find something eventually that helps you like, counter that, right? To fill yourself. So think like a weight, right? Like I know that feels like balance, right? It's like, oh, you're balancing it. Like, yeah, but not entirely, right? So you allow yourself balance. as a theory doesn't allow you to go all the way to one side, to go extreme. Counterbalance does.
I think
Right. So
people interpret balance as like coming to the center, kind of
right.
like.
Right. Counterbalance allows you to fully go all in, right? Like fully just be obsessed, pull those late at night hours, just go all in. Wake up at 3 a.m. with the crazy idea that you have about your new business or whatever. Like fully immerse yourself, but then being cognizant of the fact that I got to do some other stuff. For me, it's health. For me, it's the way I eat. For me, it's the way that I do all the crazy stuff that I do, all the acupuncture and all the various forms of therapy and float therapy and cryotherapy and all this crazy stuff that I do. For me, it's like knowing that I've really been extreme and hard on my body. What can I do to like alleviate the fact that I've done that to myself? I go really, really intense, like the way I think with my business. What can I do to really disengage when I do disengage? Like I commit every week to go to the lake on my jet ski, and I'm out there and I don't think about any business or nothing. I'm just out there and I commit to doing that. So it's a concept that I've really had to learn, and here's what it's going to benefit people. And this applies to anybody, not just entrepreneurs. When you find that harmonious, like, synchronicity of those two ideas, right? What ends up happening is that you get to the point where you're so much in counterbalance that you're like so inspired to get back into working in your business. You're like, just, oh my God, I'm so ready to work. Most people will wake up Monday morning and they're like, oh, fuck, like I gotta go back to work. I wake up Monday morning and I say this, your goal should be to look forward to Sunday night than you do Friday night, because Sunday night means you're getting ready to go pursue your passion and like crush it again. Right. And you're like really excited because not because you're just this motivated jazz person, which I know you are, but because you've done enough to nurture yourself, to provide that counterbalance and that freedom to give yourself that time, the permission to do it, that you're inspired about what you can do the next week. So you're just living happy and healthy. I finally feel like I've like really figured that out for this season of my life. And it's been just such a blessing. So I wish that I could articulate it better, like give you a playbook or like just take it out of my brain and plug it in like the Matrix and like, so you understand what I'm saying. But you can find that, not perfect it, but continue to augment that. I think what you're going to find is that you just are really in a place where you're happy. And that's probably the biggest thing that I would say, to like part with people, of like really try to find that in your life. It's a beautiful place.
And for you, that's the jet ski and your health. What else?
It could be, I mean, I've got my fish tank back here. I sit here sometimes and just like look at my fish and like change things with the tank, just crazy stuff, like no reason. I go play basketball, right? I'll go and like, shoot hoops, or, I'll go and like go on a nature walk with a friend, or I'll go out to eat every Saturday night. My wife and I have non-negotiable date night where we go out and we go eat and we disengage and we're not allowed to talk about business. Or if you want to go on a shopping spree, or if you love movies, right? Or you love going to do float therapy, which I do, right? Sensory deprivation tank. So find those things, commit to them, and know that even if you're like, oh, that just feels like a distraction and I'm so busy right now, it's necessary. One last thing we do, if you really want to go to the extreme, because my wife and I really work in the extremes, and we're like, sometimes we don't even like clean our house. We're like, why do we live like freaking college kids? It's like, because we've been working so much. It's crazy. It's really bad. So, before COVID, and I could tell, this is why it was relevant. I told you this, Derek, but I'll make sure I say it again. I noticed something was off lately, and I've been really sprinting, and I was like, what's going on? Like, I'm just not, I'm giving myself permission to like really tap into the intuition. Like, what's going on with me? And, I noticed, so we have a thing where every quarter we go on like a trip. People are like, oh, well, fancy you. No, it could literally be like you do a staycation in your own town and you go stay in an Airbnb that costs $35 a night. Like, it doesn't have to be like extravagant. Trust me when I tell you, like, we're not staying at like 5-star hotels. Like we're very frugal. But we went to Corpus a couple weeks ago, right? Corpus Christi, which is like not the best beach in the world, but it is what it is, right? So I realized that part of the reason why I was so out of alignment was because we just haven't been able to do our quarterly thing because of COVID, right? And it was like, we could really feel a tangible difference. So try to find, if that's what you want to do, just have those practices in place. And then on top of that, try to align your goals. I'm a big fan of Brian Moran's 12-week year, where like you'll have 90-day sprints towards your goals. And then you have something you celebrate to like give yourself that dopamine hit you need to like want to keep going. Like if you go to the gym, you just kick your ass every day. I used to see this when I was a personal trainer. You don't want to freaking work out anymore. You're like, this sucks, but make your workout fun, which is why things like Zumba and stuff like that, like people love it because you're getting the cardiovascular exercise that you need, but you're also enjoying what you're doing. So it doesn't have to be hard. Just find ways to reward yourself. Use your biology, right, to your benefit, right? Like give yourself the dopamine that you need. So at the end of the day, every day, I drink a Topo Chico. It's just sparkling mineral water. But I've built a habit of like, oh yeah, it's getting close to the end. Or I get my Topo Chico. I get to play little video games, go to the gym because I like those things, right? So like work with yourself, not against yourself, right? Like I think sometimes we're just so masochistic in our approach. And it's just like, dude, you can enjoy this too. Like you can enjoy this journey and like really make it fun and gamify it and not just be like, oh, it has to suck. And if it doesn't suck, then I'm not working hard enough. Like maybe that's just me. I don't know if other people feel the same way, but I was really bad about that. And so, yeah, build those things in for yourself and allow yourself to really enjoy your life. You know, remember that this whole thing is a journey, and the more you're enjoying it, the more you're going to want to keep doing it. And that to me has been such a growth hack.
Yeah. So that's a perfect place to end it. Yeah, just appreciating and because of a lot of things, but I was thinking about this last week, and because we have people getting unemployment and stimulus for the first time, I think a lot of people that were forced to grind and work, especially the minimum wage level. And I was talking to some local business owners. They are okay to just like be at home with their families and just sort of exist for a moment. And there's, we talked sort of at the beginning about like tying our value to how fast we're moving or how much we're doing, when the value of a person is like, you're just innately, you know, a valuable person just being alive. And separating that, how hard I'm driving versus just, I'm appreciating myself just for being alive, just for being me. And so, counterbalance is like, okay, well now you want to go back to driving and you want to be able to appreciate the just being aspect.
Sure.
Beautiful.
Totally. Well, dude, I appreciate you allowing me to expand on my thoughts. I'm sure that the audience is probably tired of hearing my voice at this point, but I do have one quick ask for those that are still hanging around this entire time. I don't know why you're still here. You're an absolute crazy person, but I appreciate you and I love you for it. But it takes you 27 seconds. If you could do me literally a favor by just going whatever podcast app you're on, do two things. And I'm going to tell you why. Hit subscribe and leave Derek a review. And the reason being is that the way the podcast apps work is it's the biggest way that you can help him with the algorithm, right? So it can push up his show. It's how you get your show to start trending, is to get those two things more than downloads. Most people think it's downloads. It's actually subscribers and new reviews. So if you can help him do that, it's like leaving a tip for your waiter or your waitress. So please, if you could do that, again, it takes you literally 27 seconds. If you've gotten any value out of this, please do that for me. I would appreciate it.
Wow. That's a good guest there, promoting the show for the host. Thanks for coming on. It was a really, really enjoyable conversation. Anything you'd like to plug, Startup U, or anything else?
Yeah, Hey CMH is where I'm at on social media. So at Hey CMH on all social media channels. The website's heycmh.com. If you want to learn more, I'm actually going to launch. It's a brand new class that we're launching. It's how to get your first 100 customers in 100 days. There's not even a wait list for that at the time that I'm recording this. So what I would do is go to uscdownload.com. That's Ultimate Startup Checklist, uscdownload.com. We will be advertising to those people and letting them know the class is available. It's 100% free. You do not have to pay for the class. It's a 45-minute class. Teaches you those things. So uscdownload.com. That'll immediately put you on the wait list to join that class. And then we'll be broadcasting when that class is live. I literally just wrapped it up today. And so it should be live in the next couple of weeks, but that'll really be super insightful, I think, for a lot of people that are interested. Primarily speaking, it's for people that are transitioning from job into business and doing that successfully, because you have real world responsibilities and kids and mortgages and rent and all those various things. And so you don't want to do it wrong and then find yourself like, oh my gosh, financially, I'm in a really bad spot. But you also want to pursue what you're passionate about, which is your business probably. So that'd be a great place to start. So that's, again, USC, like Ultimate Startup Checklist, download.com.
Brilliant. Yeah, sounds fantastic. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, man.
All right, Chris. Yeah, again, it's been a real pleasure. So we'll be in touch.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much, man. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, talk soon.